All right, strap in, everybody, because we're going deep on something pretty different today.
Oh, yeah.
It's this thing called the Peaceful Public License, or PPL for short.
Okay.
And it lays out like a whole new way of thinking about licensing. And get this, it's got this whole built-in ethical framework, which is really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's not just one version. There's like 3 different flavors.
Yeah.
PPL Personal, PPL Community, and then PPL Research.
So it's got options.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely built for the digital age.
Makes sense with, well, how much AI is changing everything.
Exactly. And, the creator goes by the name Nocturne Owl.
Oh, interesting.
And they seem really concerned about how art's being used or maybe misused online. Like when you read this document, there's this real sense of urgency.
Really?
Yeah, almost like a call to action.
Huh. Like a rallying cry.
Kind of, especially when you get to the Artist's Manifesto at the beginning.
Okay.
It sets the stage for what this whole PPL is all about.
Got it. So let's hear about this manifesto.
Well, it starts by painting this picture of what the creator sees as like a crisis for artists.
It's a crisis.
Yeah, and it's not just like a copyright issue. It feels bigger than that.
I wonder what they mean.
Well, it's almost existential. It's like they're saying, hey, our art is being stolen and twisted and used against us. Wake up.
Oh.
There's even this line that compares stolen art to a reflection in a warped mirror.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's powerful.
Right? It makes you feel like it's not just about legal rights. It's about something deeper.
Like the soul of the artist is under threat.
Yes, exactly. Like their essence is being threatened or something. And then they've got this peaceful creed.
A creed?
Yeah, it's like peace, consent, agency, dignity, solidarity.
Short but powerful.
Right. You can almost hear them chanting it,
I can see that.
But the interesting thing is the manifesto doesn't just stay with these big ideas.
It gets specific.
Yeah, it calls out these specific enemies that the PPL is going after.
Oh, really? Like what?
Things like AI trained on stolen art, surveillance tech, even stuff like technocracy.
So it's getting at these very real-world concerns.
Totally. And you get the sense that they really don't like being called content creators.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they're artists, full stop.
I can see that.
It's like they're trying to redefine the whole power dynamic between artists and tech.
Yeah, pushing back.
Yeah, and it's not about, like, rejecting technology completely.
Or about boundaries.
Yeah, like, hey, the human element in art still matters. You can't just ignore it.
Right, right.
So, with all that in mind, let's take a step back. Like, what is this PPL actually trying to do?
Well, at its core, I think it's trying to protect artists' rights.
In this crazy AI world.
Exactly. In a world where AI is being used to create and change art, often without the artist's okay.
And that's where that line about notice to robots and automated systems go away comes in, right?
That's the one. Not your typical legal language.
Not at all. It's like they're acknowledging this blurred line between humans and machines, but drawing a line in the sand.
A bold statement, for sure.
So we know it's about protecting art and setting ethical boundaries.
Right.
But how does it actually work? And what about these 3 versions? Personal, community, research. What's the deal?
Okay, well, they are designed for different uses, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
All 3 have these same core ethical restrictions no matter what.
So no using the art to train AI without permission.
Exactly. And that's where the PPL is really different.
It's calling out this practice of scraping data from the internet.
Yeah, which often includes copyrighted stuff.
And basically saying, nope, not without asking.
Right, and not without making sure it's being used ethically.
Okay, but how can you actually enforce that?
Yeah, it's one thing to write it down.
But how do you stop people from, like, doing the wrong thing?
That's a great question, and this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, tell me.
It's this whole compliance certification and community reporting thing.
Oh, yeah, what was that all about?
They're basically trying to create a system where the community itself helps to, keep things in check.
Oh, so like crowdsourcing ethical art use.
Kind of. It's like they're saying, look, traditional legal systems might not be enough in this fast-paced digital world.
Makes sense.
So we need to rely on the community to help enforce these rules.
I like that.
And to make things even more accountable, there's this requirement for a public compliance statement.
Oh, right, for anything online.
Yeah, if you're using PPL licensed work on a website, app, whatever, you got to publicly say you're playing by the rules.
No hiding.
Exactly. Transparency is key.
So we've got this manifesto, these 3 licenses, and this community watchdog system.
It's a lot to take in.
Right. And I bet some people listening are thinking, Why should I care if I'm not an artist?
It's a fair question. I think it boils down to control, really.
Control.
Yeah, like who controls creative work in this AI age?
Okay, I see what you mean. It's a bigger issue.
It affects all of us. Think about it. This has implications for copyright, data privacy, even just the ethics of technology in general.
Like a ripple effect.
Exactly. If we just let AI run wild and exploit art without any ethical boundaries, what message does that send?
Right, it sets a dangerous precedent.
So the PPL is saying, hey, we need to be proactive and shape the future of AI in a way that respects artists.
I like that. It's about setting standards.
Yeah, it's a call to action, not just for artists, but for everyone who cares about where this technology is taking us.
Okay, so we've covered the philosophy, the different licenses, why it all matters.
Yeah.
Now there's this verification guide that's included. What's that all about?
That's all about making sure people are actually using the official license, not some modified version.
Oh, smart.
It uses these things called Git tags.
The tags.
Yeah, you might have heard of them from, like, software development.
Uh-huh.
Basically, it's a way to verify the authenticity of the license, making sure it hasn't been tampered with.
So it brings that same level of transparency to the art world.
Exactly. If you want to make sure you're using the official PPL, you can check the Git tag for that release.
Makes a lot of sense, especially in the open source world.
Yep. The guide even gives instructions on how to do it. Pretty simple commands.
Oh, that's cool.
It helps prevent people from misrepresenting the PPL or distributing altered versions that don't have those ethical safeguards.
Trust but verify.
You got it.
You know, I'm really starting to see why you find this PPL so fascinating.
That's pretty unique, right?
It's not just about legal rights. It's about values, you know? It's artists saying, our work matters, we deserve respect, and this technology needs to be used ethically.
It's definitely a bold statement.
It really is. It's challenging the status quo and making us rethink this whole relationship between art and tech in the digital age.
It's a much-needed conversation.
Now, all this makes me wonder, will it actually work? Like, will people actually use this license? Will big tech companies even care?
Good question.
I guess we'll have to explore those in part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, so you're wondering if this PPL will actually gain traction, out there in the real world.
Oh, yeah.
Will people actually use it? Will big tech companies even pay attention? It's hard to say for sure, but
We can speculate.
we can definitely explore some possibilities, yeah.
Okay, let's play future of the PPL. Give me the optimistic scenario.
Okay, optimistic.
What happens if this thing takes off? Like, really takes off?
All right, so imagine this. The PPL becomes like the license
Okay.
for any artist who is worried about how their work might be used in AI,
So instead of the usual copyright or Creative Commons, they choose the PPL specifically to protect their art from unethical AI stuff.
Exactly. And as more and more artists start using it, tech companies, AI developers, they'd have to take notice.
They couldn't just keep scraping the internet without thinking about those PPL restrictions.
Right.
I like that. Artists would have a real say in how their work gets used, not just be victims of the algorithm.
It would totally shift that power dynamic. Yeah.
So instead of just taking data, these companies would have to actually talk to artists about ethical use.
Engage in meaningful conversations. Yeah.
Okay, that's optimistic. I like it.
That's a nice thought.
But let's be real. Things don't always go that smoothly.
Yeah.
What's a more pessimistic outcome? Be honest.
Okay, well, one possibility is that the PPL kind of ends up being this niche thing.
Niche.
Like
Yeah.
something that's used mostly by artists who are already really, really passionate about ethical AI.
So it's more like a badge of honor.
Almost like, I'm in the ethical art club. But it doesn't reach everyone, and most companies just keep doing what they're doing.
So it doesn't really change the big picture.
Sadly, that's a real possibility.
It's like preaching to the choir.
Yeah, you reach the people who already agree with you, but you don't make a dent in the bigger problem.
Okay, so that's a bummer. Anything else?
Well, there's another scenario.
Yeah.
It's a bit more complex and kind of uncertain.
All right, lay it on me.
Yeah.
What's the wild card?
Let's call it the legal challenge and evolution scenario.
Okay.
What if the PPL faces legal challenges and has to, adapt over time?
Oh, yeah, I can see that happening.
Big tech companies might argue that the PPL is too broad or that it clashes with existing copyright law.
Right.
And then the courts would have to step in and figure it all out.
That sounds messy.
Yeah, you could have years of legal battles, revisions to the PPL as it tries to find its place,
It's the most unpredictable path.
It is, but it could also lead to some really important legal precedents.
Yeah, that would clarify how ethical licensing actually fits into the law.
Exactly.
So we've got our three possible futures: widespread, niche, legal battle.
Mhm.
Which one do you think is most likely?
Honestly, I don't know. It's tough to say. A lot depends on, how artists promote the PPL,
Uh-huh.
how tech companies react, and how the whole legal landscape changes.
So many moving parts.
Right. But
Yeah.
there are a couple of things that could really tip the scales, I think.
Like what? What would make you more optimistic?
Well, if we had a really high-profile artist, someone super famous.
Like a big-name musician or really popular digital artist?
Yeah, if someone like that really embraced the PPL, it would be huge.
It would send a strong message.
And it would put a ton of pressure on tech companies to take it seriously. They wouldn't want to be seen as ignoring, a major artist.
Right, with a huge following.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that celebrity seal of approval.
But what about outside the art world? Could the government do anything?
Oh, absolutely. If government started making laws specifically about ethical AI use in creative fields, that would help a lot.
You could even see the PPL's ideas being written into law.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
It would show that these ethical concerns are being taken seriously, like at the highest level.
It would go beyond just individual artists and establish these broader rules for everyone.
So it sounds like the PPL's future is still pretty uncertain.
It is. It could fade away, it could become the norm, or it could get caught up in this legal whirlwind.
Oh, who knows?
But no matter what happens, it's starting an important conversation.
It's forcing us to think critically about how we want technology to be used.
Exactly. So let's remember, all this started with the actual license itself.
Right. We've talked about the why. Now let's talk about the how.
Good point. Back to the basics.
Can you walk us through the specifics of each license version? Personal, community, research. What's the difference?
Sure. Let's start with PPL Personal, which is the simplest one.
Okay.
It's for individuals who want to use a creative work for personal study, non-commercial education, that kind of thing.
So someone learning a new art technique from a tutorial, or a student using artwork for a school project?
Exactly. It allows for that kind of use, but those core ethical restrictions still apply.
So even for personal use, you can't use the artwork to train your AI art bot.
Nope. Not even if you're not selling the results.
The PPL is firm on that. No unauthorized AI training.
It's a clear line.
All right, makes sense.
Yeah.
What about PPL Community? How's that different?
Well, PPL Community is designed for wider non-commercial use within communities or organizations.
Like what?
Think of a community art center using artwork for a workshop, or a nonprofit incorporating artwork into their materials, that kind of thing.
So still non-commercial, but more collaborative.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the same ethical rules apply. No military use, no surveillance, no AI training without permission.
Right, those are the core principles.
Exactly. And then we have PPL Research, which is super relevant with all the concerns about AI and art.
What's special about this one?
Well, it's made specifically for academic and research purposes, and it really emphasizes ethical AI research.
So researchers could use artwork, licensed under PPL Research, to study AI-generated art, but they couldn't use it to train their own AI, right?
Perfect summary. It recognizes that studying AI and creativity is important, but it insists on ethical research.
It's about using art to study AI, not to feed it. Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Now, something that applies to all three of these versions is the compliance certification and community reporting we talked about before.
Right. Remind me how that works again.
Sure. By using a work under the PPL, you're saying you're following all the rules, including those ethical ones.
And anyone can report a violation if they see one.
It's that community watchdog aspect, yeah.
That's like a neighborhood watch for ethical art use. I like it.
It's a way to use the power of the community to uphold those PPL values.
And then there's that public compliance statement for online use, right?
Exactly. If you're using PPL licensed work on a website or app, you got to be open about it.
Transparency is key.
It's really important. You can't just hide behind your algorithm and pretend ethics don't matter.
One thing that stands out to me is this focus on preventing art from being used for things like military stuff or surveillance.
Yeah, that's pretty unique.
Why do you think that's such a big deal for the creator of this license?
I think it reflects this growing awareness of how technology can be misused, especially AI.
like for harmful purposes.
Exactly. Art is usually seen as something beautiful, expressive, even positive.
It's creative.
Right, so the idea that it could be used for warfare or spying is really unsettling.
It feels wrong, like a violation of the artist's intentions.
It's like twisting something good into something bad.
They're saying our art should make the world better, not create weapons or control people.
Exactly. But even with all these safeguards, you have to wonder, will it be enough?
Will people actually follow the rules?
Yeah, will a license really stand up to powerful forces like governments and corporations? What's stopping them from just ignoring it?
A good question.
And it gets at the heart of what makes the PPL so interesting, this ambition to use licensing as a form of activism.
Ethical activism.
Yeah, exactly. Whether it actually works or not, it's sparking an important conversation.
It's making us confront these uncomfortable questions about art and tech and ethics.
And that's a good thing. Those conversations need to happen.
I'm curious, how does the PPL fit in with, regular copyright laws?
That's a good question, and honestly, it's something legal experts are still debating. It seems like the PPL doesn't replace copyright, it adds to it.
Okay, so it's like an extra layer of protection
Yeah.
specifically for AI and ethical use.
Right. It's filling in the gaps where copyright might not be enough.
Makes sense.
What?
But what happens if someone does violate the PPL? Like, how is it enforced?
Well, it depends on the situation.
Okay.
It relies on both community enforcement and the possibility of legal action.
Oh.
So if there's a violation, the creator or someone representing them can take steps to address it.
And that might mean going to court.
It could, yeah. But the main focus is really on raising awareness and building a culture of ethical art use.
So it's about prevention rather than punishment.
I think that's a good way to put it. Make people think before they act,
So we've talked about the 3 PPL versions, how compliance works, the big ethical and legal questions.
We've covered a lot.
If our listeners were to take away just one thing from all of this, what would you want it to be?
That's a good question. I think the most important takeaway is this. The PPL shows how artists are fighting for control in the age of AI.
It's a power move.
And it reminds us that we all have a responsibility to shape how technology is used.
We have to be mindful of how we use and interact with creative work online.
Absolutely. Think about where your data comes from, who's using it, and who benefits.
That's good advice for everyone.
It really is. The PPL is definitely pushing boundaries and challenging us to rethink the relationship between art and technology.
It's a fascinating project.
It is. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but there's one last piece of the puzzle I want to look at.
Oh, what's that?
It's the verification guide. Can you remind us what that is and why it matters?
Sure. The verification guide is all about making sure people are using the official PPL, not some altered version.
Like a quality control check.
Exactly. And it uses this technique from software development called Git tags to do it.
Git tags. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, they're basically markers in the code repository that identify specific versions of the PPL. So if you want to be sure you're using the official PPL version 1.0, you check the Git tag for that release.
So they're using tech tools to ensure the ethical use of art in tech.
Yeah, it's all about bridging that gap between the art world and the tech world.
Finding a way to make them work together ethically.
Exactly. Recognizing that these two worlds are more and more intertwined these days.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the peaceful public license.
It's been a long journey.
I know, right? But I think it's been worth it. It's a really fascinating project, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed learning about it as much as we have.
It's been a pleasure discussing this with you.
But the conversation doesn't have to end here. What are your thoughts on the future of the PPL? Will it become the go-to for artists, or will it just fade away?
That's the big question, isn't it? It has the potential to be a real game changer.
It does.
But it all depends on how artists, tech companies, and governments respond to this,
It's a lot of pressure.
It is. But I'm hopeful.
Well, on that note, I think we'll leave our listeners with a question to think about. What kind of future do we want for art and technology?
We've spent a lot of time looking at, the nuts and bolts of this PPL thing.
The what and the how?
Yeah, exactly. But I keep thinking we need to talk about the so what.
You mean will it actually make a difference?
Yeah, is this just a nice idea, or could it actually change things, like how we think about art, and how it interacts with tech?
It's the million-dollar question.
It really is.
So what do you think? Put on your prediction hat for a second. Imagine some possible futures for the PPL. What do you see?
Okay, let's see.
Give me the best-case scenario first.
All right, best case.
What happens if the PPL becomes, the gold standard.
Whoa, okay. Like everyone's using it.
Yeah. Artists who want to protect their work, they automatically think PTL.
Wow, that would be something else.
It would mean artists are really taking charge.
And that tech companies are actually, like, taking ethics seriously.
It wouldn't be just about the legal stuff.
Right, it would be about respect, about remembering that art is made by humans, even when AI gets super fancy.
So we could see a whole new wave of AI development.
Or collaborative, more transparent, more respectful of artists.
Okay, I like that future.
Hmm,
But I'm a bit of a cynic.
fair enough.
What if it's more of a niche thing?
Niche, okay.
Yeah, like a small group of artists uses it, but it never really breaks through to the mainstream.
So it's like this little ethical art club?
Kinda, yeah. It shows you care, but it doesn't really change the whole system.
Yeah, that could happen.
It's definitely easier to preach to the choir, right? People already get it.
It is, yeah. It's hard to change those really entrenched ways of doing things, especially with something as powerful as, the whole tech industry.
Okay, so that's kind of a bummer, but there's another scenario we haven't talked about yet, right?
Oh, right.
The legal battle royale.
Oh, yeah, that one.
I can just imagine these big tech companies with their fancy lawyers
Battling it out in court.
saying the PPL is too restrictive or that it doesn't work with current copyright law.
Yeah, you could have years of legal back and forth.
Revisions, appeals, the whole thing.
It would be pretty unpredictable.
But maybe in the end, some really important legal decisions would come out of it.
Yeah, that could clarify a lot of things, like how ethical licensing fits with the law,
So we've got our three scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Widespread, niche, or legal drama.
Hmm.
Which one do you think is most likely?
Honestly, I have no idea. It's too close to call.
So many factors.
But I think there's one thing that could really make a difference.
What's that?
If a big-name artist, like a really famous musician or digital
Like
artist...
superstar.
Yeah, if someone like that came out and said, I'm using the PPL, it would be huge.
It would get people's attention.
For sure. And it would put pressure on these companies, They wouldn't want to look bad.
They couldn't ignore it.
Exactly. It would be like a stamp of approval.
What about outside the art world? Could the government do anything?
Oh, yeah, definitely. If government started passing laws specifically about how AI can be used ethically in art and stuff,
That could help.
for sure, it would show that it's being taken seriously,
Not just some fringe idea.
It would go beyond individual artists and set some real ground rules.
Okay, so it sounds like the future of the PPL is a big question mark.
It really is. It could be huge, it could fade away, or it could get bogged down in legal stuff for who knows how long.
We just don't know.
But one thing's for sure, it's asking some important questions.
It's making us think, right, about the role of art and technology.
Exactly. We can't just sit back and let the algorithms run the show.
We have to be part of the conversation.
Absolutely. We need to decide what kind of future we want.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the peaceful public license.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And I hope our listeners have found it as interesting as we have.
It's been great talking about this with you.
To all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to keep thinking about these issues, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. Until next time.